Hello, I'm Jack Jose. I'm the president of the board of Ohio Students for Gun Legislation, a registered 501c4 political advocacy group. Welcome to our podcast where we talk with experts working to prevent gun violence. We share advice, strategies, legislative ideas, and offer steps you can take to reduce the devastating toll guns take on American lives every year. Today we're speaking with Alaina Swope, and here to introduce our guest is the Ohio Students for Gun Legislation founder and executive director, Ethan Nichols.
Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in to our episode today. Today we're talking with Alaina Swope. Alaina is a candidate for the Ohio House of Representatives up in Ohio's 97th State House District. So Alaina is a working class candidate, and she is a champion for gun safety reform. So Alaina, if you would take a moment here and briefly talk about your background and your candidacy.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Ethan said, I'm running in the 97th district, which is Muskingum and Guernsey counties here in Southeast Ohio. I was born and raised in this district, born and raised in Zanesville, and I kind of grew up here not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really see many opportunities in this area. So I went to Southwest Ohio, to Miami University for college, and then came back here after I graduated because I knew that change needed to happen in my hometown, in my home district. So I have, growing up here, never saw a political candidate like myself. I'm openly queer, I am openly progressive, which sometimes isn't always easy to do around Southeast Ohio. So I'm running the most progressive campaign that I can because that's just who I am. I'm not trying to, subscribe to the electability myth where you have to be moderate to be electable. I believe that progressive voters are here. I believe that young progressive voters are here. And just as a whole, we need to do a better job reaching people where they are and helping them understand how these issues affect their lives.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
So as a fellow Red Hawk, how did your time at Miami shape your political views?
Love that question. So Miami has a reputation for being a conservative school. And before I went there, I really didn't know that. I didn't grow up political, so I didn't really have really solid ideology, in terms of politics. So I got to Miami and instantly realized that I was not a conservative. So I kind of immediately started running with activists and organizers, and they might be in the minority over there, but they're definitely there. I got to learn with some wonderful organizers who helped me and some friends. We started this activist club to kind of teach people how to organize and mobilize. We learned from this wonderful activist. Her name is Magda from Luxembourg. She kind of showed us how to organize and do it effectively, and we planned protests. There was a Black Lives Matter march at Miami, and that just kind of helped shape who I am. And I was getting kind of an out of the classroom education. I was studying psychology and literature while I was in the classroom. So yeah, that helped. And then I started working on campaigns. I worked on Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, then jumped to Hillary, and then jumped to some more local ones. And I ended up on Vanessa Enoch's 2018 campaign, and then just kind of came here from that.
We just spoke with Vanessa last week, and I think her post went up on Thursday.
Yeah, I'll check that out. Vanessa's amazing.
She really is remarkable.
So we usually ask all of the people we talk with if they could choose one legislative issue, one, be it background checks, red flag laws, assault weapons ban, whatever it would be. What would if you could snap your fingers and have one legislative issue pass, what would it be?
That would be a comprehensive and effective licensing system for the state of Ohio. There is robust research to suggest that a license system in combination with background checks, which are long overdue, but those two in conjunction with each other help reduce gun violence by a lot. So it would be a good, stable licensing system for Ohio.
Are you aware of any such legislation somewhere, what that looks like, someplace who's trying that, where we could look at what that legislation looks like?
Yes, Massachusetts. they have a wonderful, it's just a license system. So basically kind of how theirs works is it's almost like you can compare getting your driver's license to your driver's permit. Okay. So I'm in favor of raising the age to buy firearms from 18 to 21 because 18 to 21-year-olds commit, I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I'll definitely look that up to get that research out, but they commit a good amount of homicides. So raising that age is just kind of something to help reduce gun violence. So Massachusetts, kind of with that in mind, the age you have to be to obtain a license to carry, an LTC, is 21. But they also have a, it's not called a permit, but it's something like a license, just kind of like a license light that you can get, I think, when you're 15. And they have seen an overall reduction in gun violence by like 40%. It is, I feel like we don't hear about Massachusetts a lot in our discourse around reducing gun violence. But if you go to New Hampshire, like if you're in the New England states, you can get a gun really easily. But if you just go right over to Massachusetts, it's a different system entirely.
Well, I think that speaks to, we were just talking with Fred Guttenberg in a show that's going to go up Monday, I think before your show is going to air, but he was talking about the importance of making sure we do these changes nationally for that very reason. And you can drive across, the state line and suddenly the rules are completely different.
Right.
And so I'm imagining this permit, it's almost like is it sort of like a driver's permit that you have a period of time as a driver, at least in the state of Ohio, where you can only drive with another adult in the car with you. And then after some period of time, you graduate to your full license. Is that what this permit is for the 15-year-old?
More so, the limitations on the permit is more the type of gun you can buy. So the license is a lot more expansive in terms of what kind of gun you can own. But the permit version of this, I think it's just for like rifles and shotguns. So if you decide once you reach 21 that a rifle is not enough, then you have the option to get a license and pay for the license and graduate, I guess, to a different type of firearm. But what is interesting about their system is that it goes through the police departments. So instead of just kind of going to a gun store, getting kind of a weak background check, you have to go to your police department and get like a really intense background check. You have to be interviewed, and I think several other steps have to happen. And even after you pass all that, your police department, because it's a more local system, if they know something about you that maybe doesn't show up on your background check, they can decide not to give you the license. So that kind of community cooperation, like at a really local level, I think is a really interesting system as well. I definitely think something like that could work, at least in my community, in Muskingum and Guernsey counties, where the local police departments are still popular among the people.
Excellent. No, that's really good information. I'm taking notes.
So I know you've been a very big outspoken advocate for Black Lives Matter and similar movements recently following the murders of individuals like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Right. So I was wondering if you could speak for just a little bit about how Black Lives Matter has influenced your campaign and what you plan to do, hopefully when you're elected this come November as state representative.
Absolutely, when I'm elected. So, I think I'm still living in an area where the entire United States is seeing this, but Black Lives Matter in some communities is considered like a controversial take, and when it's not at all. Like I'm a data person, so like even if you take the humanity out of it, which you shouldn't, if you take everything out and just look at the data, we can see that like on an institutionalized scale, Black lives have not mattered. So moving forward, like as a legislator, especially thinking about Zanesville, my hometown, it is such a divided city in resources. And this happened to me on another interview where someone who wasn't from Zanesville kind of suggested that it's mostly like just kind of a white community when Zanesville's a pretty diverse city. But the problem is we're segregated in terms of resources. So most of like the white people in Zanesville live on the north end, where all of the resources are, where all the housing is. And then the lower income communities are on the south end, where we don't have good housing, we don't have good like businesses. It's just kind of a severely neglected area. So kind of making sure I'm prioritizing the people who don't feel like they have a voice in my community will correlate with Black Lives Matter, because the people who are being disenfranchised in my community are very typically Black lives. And we have the lower income white folks, we have the lower income Latinx folks that we're really not prioritizing their lives. So making sure priorities are equally distributed in every part of my community is critical.
Right. And, you know, that's why it's so important. And it's hard to have this conversation. I grew up in Ashland, Ohio. I think the demographics probably align pretty well. Actually, we're probably whiter than Zanesville. And, you know, you go, I went to Miami, and surprisingly, I thought that I was in the most diverse place a person could be. And then, then I came to work in Cincinnati, and I was like, okay, now I understand some things.
Yeah.
And, you know, teaching, showing that it's that systemic inability to get access to monetary resources is what creates this, you know, this appearance that these folks can't manage, right? These folks can't handle it. Well, they can actually. They've just not ever been given an opportunity. That at every chance we redline and to keep them away from opportunity. And it's you know, it's a challenge to have that conversation with white folks whose mindset is, I worked really hard, and they did, right? And I made it, you know, to where I am, and they did. But they don't understand how that's different than the experience of many Black people in our country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so I understand that your opponent reached his position by appointment.
You are right.
And he was appointed by a very powerful Speaker of the House who's recently been in the news. And Ethan and I thought you might have something to say about that.
Yes. So I have a lot of things to say. I'm choosing my words carefully as this story continues to unfold, because I learn more about what's happening every day.
We all do.
Yeah, so staying as up to date as possible. So yes, my opponent was not elected to the seat that I am fighting very hard to be elected to. And I can say kind of pretty confidently that there's only one of us really fighting for this seat right now. So just a little history about this district. I'm sure you two are familiar with Troy Balderson. He is the congressman for this district, who Alaina Swope is running against. Troy was elected to the seat that I'm running for back in the 2000s. And what happened is he resigned from his state rep seat so he could move up to the Congress, so he could run for Congress, which is like, that happens.
That happens.
And then Brian Hill was appointed to the state rep seat. And then by the next election, Brian Hill became the incumbent. And that is exactly, this happened in 2012, where Brian Hill was the technical incumbent, but he was just an appointee, and then he won his election and then became the incumbent until 2019. So Brian Hill won his election in 2018, and then he resigned in 2019. And that's where my opponent comes into play. He was appointed to this seat. So my district has a vicious cycle of conservative white men kind of taking hold of this seat in a pretty anti-democratic way, in my personal opinion, because there is not robust public education on that process, that these men a lot of times aren't even, you did not elect them, but they're telling you that they are your incumbent, they're your representative. So to me, that whole process feels illegitimate, and my opponent is not the first one in this area to win that way. And so, yeah, my opponent, Adam Holmes, was appointed by Larry Householder. He accepted money from the corporation that's implicated in this case, as well as money from one of the lobbyists who was just arrested. And he voted to pass House Bill 6 last year. and I am still waiting for a statement.
So those all could be coincidences.
Could be.
Just coincidences. And we're right. We do need to see where the money goes, and it's actually sad, right? When we claim to have a democratic process and this legislative process that we as Americans want to be very transparent, and instead what happens is privately this money changes hands, secret deals are made, people are appointed to positions that should be elected. It's worse than it's un-American. This good old boy network.
Yes, and that runs deep in this area. And since the news, I mean, I've been advocating for campaign finance reform for a while, but I've been especially loud about it this week because it is so sad to me to think about. I think the three of us are probably very invested in politics, but not everybody is like us. So for someone who just kind of pays attention to what news they hear here and there, how deeply distressing like this news will be to them, because a lot of people think that they can't trust the government, that they can't trust politicians. And I agree that generally we should all be maybe skeptical isn't the right word, but we should hold our politicians to a very high standard and pay very close attention to what they do, what they say, who they take money from. And to think that something this corrupt could have happened right under their noses is really sad for the message I'm trying to send, where it doesn't have to be like that. You can have just normal everyday people like me running to fight to improve this community and this state. So we need to get money out of our political system yesterday. Like our system is so vulnerable to something like this.
Well, I'm sure somewhere there's a one pager on exactly how to do that, to flip the switch, and we'll be free.
Yeah.
All right, Ethan, did you have another question?
Yeah. So for the people that are listening to this and for the members of our organization, what are some of the ways that they can get involved with either supporting your campaign or getting involved in the gun violence prevention movement through you and your campaign today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll speak to my campaign first. So if you go to swope2020.com, that's SWOPE 2020.com, you'll be prompted as soon as you click enter to be a volunteer for us, and then we'll get your information and reach out. We are phone banking a lot to reach voters. We're doing a lot of digital content. We have a strong social media presence, just trying to get our message out there. I wish it was safe to knock doors because canvassing is like my favorite thing, but I have to, just roll with what I got. So we'd love to have you. If you have no experience, even better, because we want people to get involved kind of for the first time. I think that's really exciting. And then the whole kind of gun violence prevention network, at least in Ohio, I think Ohio Students for Gun Legislation is a wonderful resource to follow. Moms Demand Action is a good resource. I'm trying to think of a couple others, but there are several gun violence prevention networks that you can join and be a part of.
Yeah, we lean on Everytown for gun safety, for some legislative and research.
Yeah, and just know that in Muskingum and Guernsey counties, guns are a big deal, and I have to be very vocal that some candidates, like conservative candidates, really often will say that they're pro-Second Amendment, and then that kind of makes the more left-leaning candidates seem anti-Second Amendment by default, but that's not what any of us are trying to do. No one is trying to take away your constitutional right to bear arms. For better or for worse, that is in our Constitution. No one is above that, okay? But what we are trying to do is acknowledge that the United States has a unique issue with gun violence. And so gun violence prevention is what we are fighting for, because no one of any political party wants to send their kid to school and not and worry if they'll come back. No one wants to go to a movie and wonder if something violent will happen to them. No one wants to go to a concert. But that is the reality we live in. I have to choose the concerts I go to now carefully, or that I went to before coronavirus, because that is a massive fear of mine, because it has happened a few times. So we have to acknowledge that we have a problem as a country, and we have to work to fix it, because there are solutions.
Well, and I think we always have to find, like, we're looking for the wording to put around it, right? I remember the Clinton administration struggled with their abortion position. And, you know, because it's that same thing where you get painted as, oh, you're for abortion. Well, I'm not actually going around, you know, you're not going around encouraging the end of the Second Amendment. You're for gun ownership. And I think what we talked about with Dr. Enoch is the gun is a tool, right? And there are people who legitimately have used guns in the course of their day, and that should not be infringed. But what we're working on is how to keep that while keeping people safe in movie theaters, in
Right.
school classrooms.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's important work.
Well, I think that's all I have today. Anything else, Jack?
That's it, unless you want to plug all of the places where people can join the fight.
Yes.
Yeah, so definitely. Alaina, you said your website is swope2020.com.
Yes.
Awesome.
And
What are
then
your
on
social
Twitter,
media?
I'm sorry?
What are your social media handles for all
Yeah,
of our
so
listeners?
everything across the board is Swope 2020. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you can find me at Swope 2020. Come down to Zanesville. We're happy to have you. We'll welcome you. This is a really wonderful place.
Awesome. And for anyone else listening, you can also go to our website, www.studentsforgunlegislation.org. Get involved there, donate, sign up for our emails. You can also find us on Twitter, at OHStudentsForGL or at SFGL National. You can also find us on Instagram at Students for Gun Legislation and on Facebook under the same handles. Thank you all for tuning in today, and please go check out Alaina Swope.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.